Hello and welcome once again to Comic Reactions, the show where we discuss, dissect, analyze, and celebrate the world's greatest storytelling medium. That's right, I'm talking comic books. I am your host, Matt Little. Thank you so much for once again taking the journey into mystery with me. We have another amazing story that we're going to be discussing today. You've already seen it on the album art, obviously. I know how podcasts work, but we're going to be talking about Deadpool, the good, the bad, and the ugly today. It originally ran in Deadpool Volume 3, I think it was 3, issues 15 through 19. This story is considered one of the best Deadpool stories of all time, and it's easy to see why. If you've already read through it, get ready to celebrate. If you haven't, get ready for me to break this story down for you. It's incredible, and then go seek it out yourself because it is well worth your time. We are starting today with some sad news. You know, I am recording these a little bit ahead of time as the crow flies. It is October 12th right now, and we just learned last night, unfortunately, that we lost a comics legend by the name of Keith Giffen. Keith was a writer, artist, just comic creator that had been around and in the industry all of my working knowledge of comic books. I remember him being one of the first names that I remembered seeing in the credits on comics. This guy wrote some of the funniest comic books and some of the most action-packed and thrilling. If you don't know who he is, I would highly suggest you seek out his run with J.M. DeMatteis. I think it's DeMatteis, on Justice League from the late 80s. You know, he took this book that was floundering. Look, the Justice League was floundering around Crisis. Go check out the Justice League Detroit era if you want to see what I mean. But they needed a facelift coming out of the Crisis on Infinite Earths. And Giffen and DeMatteis took them in a completely different direction. He made this book a sitcom. It is really funny, gang. It still holds up too. It's not just comic books funny, it's like actually funny. I think there are sort of genre funny things, the way that like a play can be Broadway funny, but is it like actually funny? These books are actually funny. If you've ever seen a character laugh using the spell out bwah ha 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 ha, that came directly from his time on this book. He ran for about, I think, 5 years and told this huge story arc that started out really funny, and then the stakes got really high at the end. Anyways, I highly recommend checking that out. He also had a long run on Legion that people remember very fondly. He was one of the very first books out of the second wave of Image. It was a comic called Trencher. And boy, was this book unlike anything else on the stands, at least that I had seen. You should really check out this art style. I'll be honest, as a kid, I was really confused by it. There's so much going on there. It's so busy, but it's so fascinating. And he's also the guy who created Lobo. And as we know, Lobo is starting to get a little bit of heat. If you are a person who follows the film franchises of the DC universe, the rumor is that Jason Momoa will be hanging up the trident and grabbing the meat hook, possibly playing Lobo in a future DCEU property, which would be pretty dope. I think he would be very good at that character. What else has Keith Giffen done? Oh, he was the guy who re-ushered in the cosmic era at Marvel in the mid-aughts. They were not going to space at all post-bankruptcy. There was a very concerted effort by editorial to keep the stories on Earth, to not really try to expand into the weird space stories and soap operas. And the first big salvo to rebuild that part of the Marvel universe was a crossover called Annihilation. Highly recommend checking out all the parts of Annihilation. It's a long story. There's a lot of books involved with it, but it really does dive right back into that big space soap opera style that Marvel made great in the 70s. And Keith Giffen reestablished this and paved the way for Guardians of the Galaxy to relaunch under Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. That wound up becoming one of the cornerstones of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that all started when Keith Giffen brought the cosmic Marvel Universe back to the forefront. So, you know, R.I.P., a true legend in the industry. We will miss the human, but he has left us with an incredible catalog of comics content to look back on and celebrate for the rest of our own natural lives. So thank you, Keith Giffen, for all of your amazing work. The world will miss you. He also had maybe the funniest send off from a comics creator ever. Last night was the night before New York Comic Con. He passed away on Monday, and his family put up a post on his Facebook that he told he told DC and everyone that he was sick, and he would do anything to get out of going to New York Comic Con, and ended the message with "Bwah ha 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 ha." Even goofing from beyond the grave. I love that dedication, and that's really a testament to a family that loved that man too, that they were okay with putting a message like that out there. We're going to be diving into this story in a minute. What I wanted to do right now is I want to give a shout out to one of our episode's sponsors. Today's show's sponsor is Dr. Pim's Bachelor Dinners. Hey bachelors, it's 2023 and your time is at a premium. Heck, even your side hustles have side hustles. No one understands what it's like to be a busy, hungry bachelor more than Hank Pym. That's why Dr. Pym came up with these ready-to-eat frozen meals just for you. Here's how it works. Head over to www.pimchow.com and set up your unique profile. You'll be asked a series of questions like, do you eat meat? And ants, what you think? Pym's team of Ultron assistants will then assemble a week of meals based on your preferences and ship them right to your door, already frozen, just reheat and eat. Best of all, Dr. Pym's Bachelor Dinners take up 1/30th the space of ordinary microwavable sad meals. That's because they are pre-shrunk using Pym particles to both save on shipping and save you space. Pop them in the microwave and they expand to regular size. And only Pym particles have been recognized by the FDA as, quote, maybe not dangerous to ingest, unquote. So, eat with confidence. Use code ILOVEYOUJANET to get your first week free. Just pay shipping and handling. Dr. Pym's Bachelor Dinners are another creation of Pym Technologies, making the impossible Pym possible. All right, so let's dive into the meat of the show today, gang. We are taking the Wayback Machine right now to 2012 Marvel, aka just the beginning of peak Marvel. The Avengers had just come out in theaters, and we had no idea how big the Marvel Universe was about to get. However, Marvel themselves were looking to do a line-wide refresh across all of their books. It was an initiative that they called Marvel Now. And when I say now, it was spelled all caps with an exclamation point. And they would do a couple more of these over the next few years. Sales department loves to see something successful, and they say, if it worked once, let's see if it'll work 45 more times. And that's what Marvel did. But this was the very first of those big initiatives. And one of the big books that they announced from the jump was a brand new Deadpool series by Jerry Dugan and Brian Posehn, featuring art on the first arc by Tony Moore, aka the original penciler from The Walking Dead. Deadpool had only recently regained a popularity that he had only seen in the early 90s. Back in 2007, Daniel Way relaunched the Deadpool solo title in the wake of Secret Invasion, and he had a 5-year run on the book where we slowly watched Deadpool across pop culture begin to rise in prominence, more so in comics. But you really started to see people revisit Deadpool and go, hey, I actually kind of like this character. Way heated the character up, and Dugan and Posehn then came in and gave the company a pitch for these characters. Now, these two were unknown within the realm of comic books. Brian Posehn was a comedy writer and comedian. You may know him from the 90s sketch show Mr. Show, which was one of my favorite TV shows. Really just like a pillar of my creative being inside. We used to tape trade on VHS episodes of it in college and just watch them religiously. Brian Posehn was brilliant. He was also a stand-up comedian in Los Angeles and frequented the Los Angeles comic shop Golden Apple Comics, where he met a store clerk might sound reductive, I apologize. He was a person who worked at Golden Apple, and his name was Jerry Dugan. The two struck a friendship up over the years. Brian eventually got Jerry some production side work so that he could leave the store, and from there, Jerry and Brian realized they really liked working together. They wrote a screenplay that they called The Last Christmas about a murderous Santa Claus that they shopped around but didn't get a bite on, so they decided, hey, let's turn this into a comic book. They both loved comics. They said, let's do it. They hooked up with Rick Remender, who you usually know as a writer these days, but he drew this series. So they built this graphic novel called The Last Christmas at Image Comics, and off the back of that, pitched to Marvel the idea to relaunch Deadpool. And relaunch they did. The book was an immediate hit, featuring covers by Jeff Darrow in that first run. I love Jeff Darrow, by the way. We were talking about the detail in Keith Giffen's work on Trencher. No one does detail like Jeff Darrow. You could look at a page of his for hours and still discover new things. It's like he's trying to constantly build a Where's Waldo trap for himself. It's incredible. His work is amazing. I always recommend checking him out as well. About a year into the run is where we find ourselves now. This is about 2 years before the Deadpool movie hit. And when I say hit, it was a hit. I love that film. Another fun fact about it. Pizza Rat is actually in the Deadpool movie. He is part of one of the blueprints that Deadpool, aka Wade Wilson, draws up during the film. If you don't know, by the way, why I would call that out, I filmed a video years ago that went very viral. I called it Pizza Rat. And it's been really fun to see it sort of pop up in pop culture after that. And I am so excited to see that in the first Deadpool film. So we're at issue 15 of this brand new run by Posehn and Dugan. They would go on for another few years. They wrote this as a team up until the end of this volume, which I think ends at like issue 45, maybe right around Secret Wars. Dugan would continue to write at Marvel. He's still writing to this day, is one of their most trusted and prolific writers, is great in the comics medium. Posehn hasn't really written much since in the comics medium since Deadpool. A couple of one-shots with Jerry after that fact. I think the last thing he may have written for them was 2021, but he has gone back to stand-up as well, has released some great albums. Okay, so the setup here is Deadpool has been running around the Marvel Universe again for a while, but in the background of a few issues, he would just get knocked out, thrown in a van, and not have a memory of what happened after that, and would wake up kind of stitched together. He realized that someone was like knocking him out, harvesting his organs, and then he doesn't know what was happening with it. That all builds to this story arc here. A lot of the first year of the book really leaned into the goofiness, the silliness, the fun of Deadpool. And it was all a setup to just kind of, Cobra Kai, Johnny sweep the leg on the audience, as this story is really intense and really personal for Wade and really digs into the heart of the character and unveils some new truths about his past. We start in part 1, aka issue 15, in the past. We see how Wade left the Weapon X program out the trash chute. Wade had gone to Weapon X because he had terminal cancer, and he was hoping that he could give his body up in exchange for them to figure out how to cure it. And over the course of this time, experiment after experiment after experiment, he became the sort of pizza face, the pizza body that we know today. They felt like he was not receiving the treatments properly back in the day, and so they literally tossed him out with the trash. So he gets shooted out into this sort of tundra wasteland of old Weapon Plus bones. I said Weapon X earlier. We know it is the Weapon Plus program. And while this is happening, a tech from a rep from Department K, which is the sort of Weapon Plus program in Canada, is being explained to by the tech from the Weapon Plus program about what is happening. And Wade was riddled with cancer. They figured that he was a dead man anyway, so they said, hell with it, let's kick him out into the snow. What they don't realize is that Wade actually was curing his cancer. His regenerative process did kick in, so it's in a constant fight where his cancer is exploding and then dying, and it's just a constant back and forth in his body. They don't know all that yet. Wade doesn't even really know that yet. But he gets up from his graveyard of skeletons and wanders off into the night. Meanwhile, this rep that we saw earlier talking to the tech, he kills the tech and immediately sets up shop. We're going to learn that this man is the antagonist of this story, Butler. They don't like leather in Butler. That is an in-joke for my friend Jason and maybe 10 people who used to listen to DVE in Pittsburgh. In the present now, we learn why Butler wants Wade so badly. It's because Butler's sister also has cancer, and she is in a state of suspended animation. Butler hopes that Wade is the solution to solve her illness because he realizes, oh, Wade, you did find a way to cure that cancer. Can I steal your organs, and can I cure my sister with your kidneys? We cut to Deadpool breaking into Avengers headquarters at this time. The Avengers were still in their tower, not the mansion, the big old Tony Stark tower. Maybe that's where they are? I gotta be honest, I'm not 100% right now. So feel free, continuity police, call me out on the socials or in the comments. Anyways, Wade breaks into the Avengers HQ, pays a visit to Logan in bed. And that's not just me playing the game. He literally visits Logan in bed, trying to figure out, yo, Logan, you know a lot of things about a lot of people. You ever heard of a guy named Butler? And Logan's like, well, you mean Jarvis? And Deadpool's like, no, Butler. Logan says no, and also GTFO of my room. Wade is like, okay, fine. But as he leaves, he turns around and says goodbye to Storm, who is still in the bed under the covers. That's right. Logan and Storm were banging the night before. It's electric. Wade pays a visit to Cap, who's also in the middle of a fight with AIM because A, it's a super soldier thing, and B, Cap is the Tony Robbins of superheroes. Wade figures if he's a super soldier, this might be tangentially related, but also he needs advice from the best man in the Marvel Universe. With no help from Cap or Logan, really, they're sort of dismissive of him, but Wade goes out to dinner and kind of cooks himself up a plan, right? He says, these guys are going to keep abducting me, but if they're going to abduct me again, I'm going to implant a tracker in my own body so that I can follow them and my body part to wherever they go. So later that night, Deadpool's at home and he gets a visit from Logan, who actually had been tracking Wade since he also was like, yo, Storm, you good? I got some stuff to do. You need an Uber? Anyways, he's been tracking Wade since then, and he says he believes Wade now because he also saw a bunch of other freak shows tracking Deadpool as well. And as soon as this information is DL'd to Wade, they are ambushed, and it's Butler's goon squad. This scene is awesome. This is the first opportunity that our art team, Declan Shalvey and Jordi Belair, get to cut loose. Shalvey is a master storyteller as a penciler and cartoonist. I love his work, and he doesn't do a whole lot of interiors, especially on superhero comics. So when he shows up he's very selective of his projects. When he does dive into something, he knows that he can give it his all, and the action throughout this story is fantastic. I'll probably say that a million more times, but a really big fan of Shalvey. And as Logan and Wade take apart this goon squad in this building, you know, they escape by blowing up the entire building. Wade gets up to the roof of one of the other buildings and calls out Butler, who is hovering above them in a helicopter. Wade says, ain't nobody got time for you to land, and opens fire on the whirlybird, but unfortunately, it's not enough because this copter is loaded down with guns, and they just shred Logan like he is some rotisserie chicken. Wade comes to in a back-to-tank back at the Weapon Plus program, and Butler is kind of staring over him like, you know, a hungry vulture. And they note that, you know, Wade has some unusual brain activity going on at this time. So, as a side note and a catch-up to what was going on in the books, there was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent by the name of Preston who had been tracking Deadpool, winds up helping him, but in the course of that, over the first year of the book, Preston is killed, and Wade feels personally responsible for Preston's death and vows to get Preston back in her own body. But in the meantime, somehow, her consciousness is trapped in Wade's head, because comics. I mean, last episode, we just watched Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus have their climactic battle on literally a field of milk in somebody's head. We don't know whose, because comics, and that's just sometimes how it goes. But Preston is also in Wade's head, and that's going to be important for the story. She really gets to see how messed up Wade is, and also they argue a lot about Wade's point of view, his sense of morality, and Preston's own sense of morality, and what she thinks are Wade's motivating factors, which she eventually learns aren't quite what they seem as well. But a great back and forth between these two. And now, of course, the Weapon Plus program doesn't know that Preston is in Wade's head at this time. But either way, they feel like it doesn't matter, because Butler says Wade is never leaving this facility. And that is the end of Chapter 1. That brings us into issue 16, aka Chapter 2. We open with a character named Colonel Jong entering the scene. God, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Again, I apologize if I am butchering names. Feel free to roast me in the comments. But this man will be the second antagonist of this story. I got it right that time. But Jong is a representative of North Korea whose government had hired Butler to create an army of super soldiers for the nation, just like the Weapon Plus program. Young and Butler excuse themselves, and shortly after, Wade is able to break free from his sick little waterbed coffin, and he makes quick work of these scientists and guards because they're just scientists, and these guards were probably being paid part-time, maybe minimum wage. Butler doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's going to give a guard like a great deal. Like, hey, come work for me. You're going to get a 401k and insurance. I bet you they probably were on Cobra or whatever the Canadian equivalent of Cobra is. And it doesn't matter now because they're dead. And Wade is rooting around the lab here, and he finds another tank with a big old sticker on it that says Tabula Rasa. And luckily, Preston headcanons this, realizes this is something that she'd seen before. It's a highly experimental drug used for long-term space missions to keep astronauts from freaking out in hibernation. And also, it's used to wipe memories. How convenient. Now we know why Wade has never had a recollection of any of his abductions up until now. But Deadpool makes a break for it, and when he gets outside, he's like, okay, well, I'm assuming I'm in Canada, but he's not. He is in North Korea. And there is Butler just kind of hanging out by the door, and he's like, yo, Wade, what's up? He reveals that they stopped experimenting on Wade when they figured out how to cure his cancer. And he invites Wade to come see the fruits of his labor in a nearby camp, right? So they've been picking apart Wade's organs for who knows how long. And Butler did it. He's been experimenting on North Korean soldiers. And he says, hey, I've been really, what's the Dr. Moreauing it up over here. It took me a second. I was like, Caligari, Moreau, Pym, which doctor is it? But he's been Island of Dr. Moreauing a bunch of North Korean soldiers into, which they show are sort of these rotting versions of the X-Men. So they've got a little bit of that weight in them because their body is decomposing, but they also were able to get these mutant abilities to trigger in these soldiers as well. And this is all thanks to Wade's tissue and body parts, right? And this is what turns them into super soldiers. Wade is appalled, but he honestly doesn't give a shit. He's like, dude, you can do whatever you want to with these meat puppets. I'm going to kill you, and then I am going to GTFO. But before he can slice and dice, Butler drops a bomb on Wade. I'm glad I met you, Butler. I feel better about the horrible life I've led. So I'm going to kill you and leave now. If you do that, you'll never see your family again. If I had a family, they gave up on me when I went to the Weapon Plus program. Not your old family. The new one you began by impregnating Carmelita Camacho. What? Before we learn more, Butler shoots Wade in the skull. Later on, Preston wakes up. She's the first to wake up inside Wade's head. And she's like, yo, wake up, get back online. Control-Alt-Delete. Did you try plugging and unplugging the power? When they both wake up, they realize despite all their rage, they are still just some rats in a cage, in a hole, in the ground. Wade is uncharacteristically silent, depressed, upset. Preston's trying to snap him out of it. She's like, we got to figure out where we are. We got to get out of here. And eventually, Wade just says one word, Eleanor. Carmelita, I think she found me a few years back and hit me up for child support. I kind of remember laughing her off. I told Carmelita that she was running a scam and it was impossible that her baby could be mine. Wade, the drug they were pumping into you damaged your brain's ability to stop memories. What you're remembering might not have happened at all. Do you remember seeing your son for the first time? Anyways, they're interrupted when the Nightcrawler-looking soldier bamfs into the room. His name is Kim, and he tells Wade that the prisoners have their powers now and they've made a pact. They're going to escape tonight because their families are being held hostage in another nearby camp. Preston basically says, scoot over, Jesus take the wheel. She takes over for Wade and Wade's skull, and she asks Kim, can you take us with you? He explains to Kim that he is the person that they got their powers from, right? So now all of a sudden Kim is like, you're the source of our powers. Wade asks who trained them. Kim kind of says, training. And then we get a flashback from Kim's point of view, and oh God, this is a nightmare. We learn how Kim activated his powers. We cut to the North Korean army tying up 3 identical-looking Nightcrawler people to posts, and there is a soldier with a gun to the back of the head of one of them, and they're trying to force him to use his mutant power, and he can't do it, so they kill him. And then they move on to the next guy, and he can't do it either, so they kill him. And then they put the gun to Kim's head, and he is terrified. He's so terrified that he bamfs. And that is how each of them learned how to use their powers. That is not Professor Xavier's school for sure. So Kim offers Wade escape, but, Deadpool is too deep in his feels to do anything about it right now. So he says, yeah, Preston take the wheel for a while, and Wade just kind of hangs out by the side. Preston is now in control of the body, and they sneak out and it's a very rainy night. They come across a heavily guarded barn. In RPG terms, this is a dungeon, and it is time to raid. Raid they do. They make quick work of these guards, and they're like, why is this place so Fort Knoxed out? And they learn why when they find 2 Bacta tanks in the back of the barn, and these ones are chock full of a little Logan and a little Steve Rogers. That's right, Wolverine and Cap are also in a state of suspended animation. Butler stole them as well, and that's our cliffhanger at the end of part 2. Part 3 jumps right in where we left off. Wade frees Logan and Steve, gives them the download on what is happening, where they are. Logan and Cap are pissed. They're ready to get out of here, and they just want to go home, right? Wade asks them to stay because Butler may have his daughter, may being that she may be his daughter. We're still kind of uncertain at this point. But Logan and Cap now have skin in the game, literally, because they do realize Butler probably has their DNA as well. Kim introduces himself because he's a polite soldier, and soon after, the rest of the NK men show up. The rest of this is a Colossus and a Cyclops that all sort of look like the X-Men, a Thunderbird, a Sunfire, and they are ready to get their families back. They are ready to kick some ass, and they can't believe that they're, face to shield with the Captain America. They're blown away by the Logan. There's also a North Korean sort of Wolverine as well. And they all form a big super group. Weirdos assemble. And the team tears through this next camp full of soldiers. And again, another opportunity for Shelby to cut loose on the action. Some really awesome moments here. And a little bit of levity in the darkness. The Colossus and Logan are teaming up. And the real Logan says, pick him up and throw him. And the Colossus is like, what? And Logan says, it's called a fastball special. So the Colossus goes, okay. And he launches this Logan, but launches him way over the guard tower that he meant to. And that's the last we see of that character, unfortunately. And then meanwhile, the Cyclops is furious, and he does a Chris Jericho, opens his eyes and brings the walls down for those about to... I won't continue that or destroy. I was probably peeking on the mic there as well. Anyways, nearby, some standard order non-playable character soldiers give themselves a hot beef injection, and the next thing they know, they're big old rock monsters, and they're ready to take on these NK men, and they grab Sunfire out of the sky and throw him into the barbed wire around the camp, and it just shreds him. This poor guy is just electrified and ripped to pieces. And then they turn around, they grab the Thunderbird and play Make-A-Wish, and they're pulling him in two. And again, Shelby's art is equally gross and jaw-dropping. You're just seeing the sinews in his midsection being pulled apart. And you think, oh, he's going to get torn apart. But here comes Cap, Logan, and Wade. They save the day. They execute one of these rock boys. And then the other one, freaking out, gives up the info about where their DNA samples are being held and where the families of these X-Men knockoffs are being held as well. Outside, the remaining rock boy tells the trio that Butler and Young are long gone, right? They've already fled to Camp 23, which is where all of the soldiers' families are located. And right then, we cut over to Camp 23 as we see Jong and Butler finalizing their deal. The North Korean army now has the means to build super soldiers for themselves, and Butler has the tissue samples he needs to cure his sister's cancer. And Butler says, you know what, do whatever you want with the rest of the people in this camp. Chop them, fry them, put them in a stew. I've got what I need, and I am, like Doug, out of here. Part 4. The crew makes their way to Camp 23, just mowing down the in-between camps along the way. And the colonel is furious that the heroes were left alive by Butler's men. He figured they would off them, but before they can really argue about it, Butler and the colonel, a soldier informs them, Deadpool has been captured and is in chains at the gate of the camp. And so the two come out, and when they approach Wade, it's revealed that this is not Deadpool. It's actually the North Korean Cyclops, who opens his eyes wide for everyone to see and just obliterates everything in this camp immediately. Everything is destroyed, and that resulting destruction gives the real Deadpool a chance to get the drop on the colonel, and he demands to know where Butler is, and the colonel is not helpful, so Deadpool says, hey, I'm going to make a yang kebab, and he skewers the colonel with his sword. R.I.P. this dickweed. Meanwhile, we cut to Butler, who's panicked, he's running away, and he narrowly escapes through a security door, which is a big, heavy door, and it locks behind him. Now we don't know how to get to Butler. But meanwhile, in the mines at the camp, the order is given, execute all of the soldiers' families. And the soldiers line up all of these innocent people, and they're terrified, and they're about to be just mowed down by gunfire. And right before the fingers squeeze the trigger, in leaps Captain America to save the day, because you're damn right he does. He pulls out that shield, and he holds this gunfire off. He tells all of the families to get behind him, and he's doing everything he can until the firefight suddenly stops. Cap's a little confused, and he looks up only to see Wade running off in the other direction with a just sea of slaughtered soldiers in front, or in between them rather. Wade had just mowed them all down, saving the day for Cap and the families. And after that fight wraps up, families are just pouring out of the camp. You know, Wade is getting himself ready to see Carmelita the first time in God knows how long, and to actually meet his daughter, Eleanor. And, you know, it's thick smoke everywhere. You see these people kind of filtering out and reuniting with their families. And then out walks Logan. And he says, Wade, you gotta stand down, dude. And Wade says, no, eat a dick. I want to go find my family. And he starts to run off. And Logan goes, no, don't do it. Listen, I've got a really good nose. I am the Toucan Sam of the Marvel Universe. And they're both gone. And so Wade immediately freaks out, filled with rage. He just rushes forward headlong into this plume of smoke, searching for any sign of them. And what he finds is actually even worse, because the dust clears and he is standing in a pit filled with dead bodies of executed prisoners over however long this camp had been there. And right there in Wade's arms is the body of Carmelita. Eleanor must surely also be in the pit as well. And so, you know, life and death have been a game for Wade up to this point. He had no family, nothing to lose. But now, in the bodies of all these dead prisoners, thinking that they're both gone, Wade just breaks down in tears, screaming just in anguish, because they're both dead, and it's all his fault. And that takes us to the final chapter of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, issue 19, a.k.a. Part 5. Logan, Steve, and Wade are inspecting the bunker hatch that Butler had scurried off into, trying to figure out how to get it to open. Wade is just deadly serious. He has one goal now, and that is to destroy Butler. He doesn't care who knows that he's in a bad mood. He's taking it out on Cap and Wolverine. Kind of drives them both away. They're like, you know what? We'll figure out how to do this somewhere else. And that's exactly what Wade wanted. And he narrates at the door, and he tells Butler, he says, just you and me now, motherfucker. And I know you can hear me. Tells him you can stand down there and hope that the North Koreans get here to save you, or you can open the door and maybe we can make a deal. By the way, how happy do you think that the North Korean army is going to be when they realize that you're still alive, and that mutate army that you put together for us, guess what? They're halfway to China by now, maybe even already there. You've given them a can of worms that was immediately opened, and now they have nothing. They are going to want to have you for dinner. The hatch opens, and Wade walks in, and he makes his way down through some, it looks like the Death Star inside, and, Wade makes his way all the way down to Butler, and, it's a Weapon Plus design panic room that Butler's in. Sort of like one of those, like force field cage prisons that they're sitting in. And Butler's in there, and his sister is in there, and she's hooked up to a bunch of machinery. And we figure, this is probably him trying to bring his sister back to life. And Wade asks why Butler had to bring Wade's family into this. Butler even covered up Wade's original crimes after escaping the Weapon Plus program because, he just wanted to see if Wade remembered their deal. Because when Wade originally signed up for the Weapon Plus program to try to cure his cancer, Butler monologues and tells us, what happened there. And Wade was just super quiet, super focused. We realize Wade is focusing on Butler's sister, and Butler is starting to get, pissed off that Wade's not listening. He says, look at me, look at me. Butler's also freaking out, and he's like, where is the North Korean army? Whether or not they hate me, they should have stormed in here by now. The reason they haven't is because standing at the gate of the camp is Captain America. He's just standing there, and the North Korean army see him, and they're like, is this for real? And they realize they do not want to mess with the living legend. So the entire North Korean army literally stands down. Cap didn't even have to lift a finger. Meanwhile, Back in the bunker, Wade says, you know what, we're both assholes, but deep down, I know I'm a better person because I made the choice to walk away. But Butler continued to make killers and experimented on people like lab rats. Butler knows this and is like, why are you monologuing to me about this? And Wade replies, oh, I wasn't talking to you. And that's when Butler's sister rises from the grave. She sits up and opens the door to the panic room by hitting the big red panic room door open button and asks Butler, how many times have I died? And this moment, Butler goes, oh shit, and it's too late because Wade slides right under the door Indiana Jones style and grabs Butler by the throat, and he spews Butler's own words right back to him. Fate delivered you to me. What a badass line. And then Wade gets his revenge, and with Butler's last moments, he begs Wade to listen to him, saying that Wade's done. Well, we don't know what it was because Wade doesn't want to hear it. He snaps Butler's neck, killing him instantly. Wade turns around and collects some DNA samples from Butler as evidence of his crimes, and he leaves the sister in the bunker of her own volition. She is basically like, hey, I want to die. I've had a nice long life, and I've been a lab rat. I don't even know if this is my brother. It's a real messed up situation. Anyways, Logan shows up and is like, I've rigged this place with enough C4 to blow up the moon. Mr. Show callback. They all exit the bunker, Logan and Wade, and it's time to go, and the North Korean army is still at the gates. They meet up with Cap, and the army parts like the Red Sea as Logan, Steve, and Wade all walk out, and they get their badass action moment as Wade detonates the base, and it blows up behind them. Slow motion walkout action film style. And that is the end of Butler's North Korean super soldier program. The next thing we know, it's 4 days later, and we're in Tokyo, Japan. Steve, Logan, and Wade, they're all out of costume. They've been there for a few days. They say their goodbyes to each other. Logan takes off. Steve takes off. Deadpool is still there, and Preston is still in his head. And she says, you kind of cut Butler off at the most important part. Your daughter may be alive. And if so, Wade tells her he'd rather she be the person that finds Eleanor once Preston has a new body because, he'd only bring her more pain. Wade, it's just like, that is depressed. Wade's depressed. That is just depression logic right there. Suddenly, before we can even process that, Wade stops and looks back at us, the reader, because he's still used to the idea of someone following him, and we are, but from outside the page, we're not going to harvest his organs. We're just going to continue to follow his stories. There's a final page of the issue that sets up the next story in this run. It's not really consequential to the action here, so we'll just drop the subject there. This essentially concludes the story arc, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we talked a lot about death and dying and all that fun stuff. And one of the things we know about Wade is that he dies a lot. There's a lot of stories where he gets blown up, fricasseed, basically treated like a Looney Tune, and he still comes back for more. This guy cheats death. Or does he? We always think that Wade's being killed and brought back to life, but did you know Wade actually can't ever die? His girlfriend won't allow it. And that brings us to today's backup strip, which is Deadpool and Death, Annual 1998. By Joe Kelly, one of the best Deadpool writers ever. Joe had a run on Deadpool from the 1996-97 series up until he left the book, I think, around 99, and I think Priest took over, and then Gail Simone. But anyways, Joe Kelly, considered one of the godfathers of Deadpool lore, and he created a piece of lore here that is so bizarre and fun, and we learned that Wade did die once, right? So he died once, but he was so funny, so charming, that Death herself took a liking to him, and they hooked up. He made the beast with two backs with Death herself. And, we kind of realized their attraction grew more and more over time. We start to see why Wade was always okay with throwing himself into the fire. He's always like, hey, don't worry about it. Yeah, blow me up, because he knows he's going to go get to hook up with his girl, And so Wade visits her often after he's been blown up, shot, whatever. But Death will never let him die. Why? Because she loves him. That's a really funny, fun story, like really out of left field, and it gives an in-continuity explanation to why this guy would just keep throwing himself into the fire and getting slaughtered in action over and over and over again. Yeah, he's crazy, but there is a logic to why he does it. It's a really fun story. I will say, if you pick it up, it is a comic from 1998, so be warned about the production values. Here's the thing. We just got computer technology for production around this time, and we still didn't really know how to use them. And so everyone everyone that used any sort of computer production on a comic just did too much, right? You're gonna see a lot of like weird coloring choices and some crazy font choices and sound effects and stuff like that. It's all over the place, and it all feels very, very dated to that time, and a lot of it is kind of an eyesore. Just want to warn you in case you were never in that world at that time. And I'll tell you what, the story is actually still canon. It hasn't been retconned. And if you're a longtime Marvel reader, I know you might be wondering right now. I've been talking about how Death and Deadpool hook up. You might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, I thought Death's boyfriend was Thanos. And so did Thanos, and that was until Wade came along. This actually gets paid off much later down the line. Around this time, actually, there's a 2015 miniseries called Deadpool versus Thanos that is all about Thanos, the jilted ex-boyfriend, being like, I am going to murder you for real for stealing my girl. But that is a story for another time. So let's talk about what I loved here in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Tonal balance. You know, a lot of Deadpool writers shoot for the slapstick in Wade Wilson's adventures, and they don't really dive into his feels. And this story is dark, it's personal, and it really reveals Wade to other people in the Marvel Universe. This really started the sort of respect that Deadpool earns from other heroes within the Marvel U. After this, Wade continues to build a relationship with Captain America that peaks at Secret Empire and kind of has some tragic endings there. Again, a tale for another time. Bestpool. This is one of the best Deadpool stories you can read. It is on tons of Deadpool lists, and it's easy to see why. I've only talked a little bit about Shalvey, but his storytelling is so clean, so precise. He doesn't, he's not like a heavy lines guy. All of his lines and his line work, it feels like everything is there for a reason, and everything was just like perfectly placed. He feels more like an architect than an artist. I don't say that pejoratively. I say that with awe. Really, really appreciate it. And of course, Jordi Belair, his longtime collaborator. I don't know that they collaborate as much anymore. I know. However, whenever they work together, it really is magic. You know, this entire feel, and Jordi brings an entire different feel to the book immediately. Her sort of muted and washed colors over Declan's art is a stark contrast to the much brighter coloring style that we had seen in this run on Deadpool up until this point. So really just makes this entire story feel very, very distinct. Yeah, like I said, art standing. I really love Declan Shalvey's art. Perfect fit for the story. You know, his characters act, even Deadpool with a mask on. You can tell what his expressions are. His pacing is amazing. I already talked about the line work. This entire creative team was on fire here. And yeah, like I said, Jordi Belair, incredible colorist as well. You could just feel both of them in lockstep. And, you know, this fearsome foursome of Dugan, Posehn, Belair, and Shalvey just created an incredible story, one for the ages, one that I think that anyone that would want to read a Deadpool story, you could give them this, and it's gonna, aside from the Preston stuff, which does actually get filled out at the beginning of the issues, you know, there are these recap pages. I'm hoping that those are in the trades and the collections as well, that kind of catch you up to speed on where the book is right before you crack page 1. And you have something like that to set you up and go running. I really do encourage you to check this story out, even though I kind of just walked you through the whole thing. Re-experience it for yourself. It's available on Marvel Unlimited. Well, that about does it here at Camp Comic Reactions. Camp Comic Reactions? I don't know. Camp Comic Reactions will go with it. Thank you again for taking this ride. I've said it before, but your time is always at a premium, and that you would spend an hour with me just hanging out and jamming on comics really means a lot. If you enjoyed yourself, one of the best ways to get word out about the show, and I need your help doing this, tell a friend, leave a review, even if it's just a starred review and you don't write anything, wherever you get your podcasts. That means so much. It really does bump the weight of the show up in the algorithm and gets us more opportunity to get in front of more eyes of more comics fans. Let's build a fun, positive community about comics, because it really is the greatest storytelling medium on the earth. I would love to hear what you think of this story. I would love to hear what you think of the show, suggestions, maybe a book that you would like to see covered in a future episode. Hit me with whatever you want. You got several different ways to do it. You can email us at comicsrxns@gmail.com, or on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and Instagram. Both of those handles there are at comicsrxn, Comic RXNS. I, again, can't even do my own handles. Anyways, the links will be in the description as well. Letters can say far more easily what I could with words. Once again, thank you so much for coming back to the show. We will be back next week with another episode. I can't wait to share it with you. I can't wait to continue to share my love of comics with you. I hope that you have a great time with me. I hope you have a great time with this show. And remember, keep reading comics, and we'll see you next time. I'm Matt Little, and I still don't have a sign off.